Welcome to another episode of Coast to Coast Sports, where we are all things Oregon Ducks, all things Florida Gators, and everything in between. I am your host, Matty Ice Raridan, and that gentleman over there is Smoking Gator David Street.
What up?
We had a very, very productive weekend with college football this weekend. I was very impressed with several teams, including my own, and we will talk about that. But there was a lot of action-packed smash mouth football this Saturday. And with that being said, I'm actually going to pass the torch over to David so he could go ahead and go over the Florida Gators game.
Thank you, Matty. So you were impressed with your team, and you should be. I was impressed with your team as well. But unlike you, I was not impressed with my team. Yes, we won, but that felt like a loss, because everybody, me included, I will certainly own up to this. We all thought that this was going to be a cakewalk, that we all thought that we were going to blow the brakes off of Charlotte, and we didn't. We only had one touchdown the entire game at home. And give Charlotte credit. I'm not trying to take away. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. So just Charlotte fans, if somehow you find this episode, if you find this channel, I know what I'm about to say. It might sound like I'm making excuses, and you have every right to think that. I won't begrudge you for that. But just Matty, the team that I saw last night was not the same team that I saw last week against Tennessee. And in my short about the three keys to victory that we needed against Charlotte, the last key that I mentioned was we cannot look ahead to Kentucky, and I felt like that's exactly what we did. I felt like Billy Napier and the boys just did not take this game seriously. I think they expected this game to just be a cakewalk. And yeah, I understand that we had injuries, but still, when anybody who was able to watch the game, which that game wasn't on TV, so literally anybody who was actually able to watch it, I think you could just tell by our players' body language, just poor execution, just overall lack of effort compared to what we saw last week. And you could tell that we just did not take this opponent seriously. We did not give these guys the respect that they deserved. And to further illustrate lack of effort, there was a point in the game, I don't remember who it was, but one of the receivers caught the ball, and it looks like he made a very, very good grip, and then he just lost the ball. And to me, that right there just screamed extreme lack of effort. And it was a very frustrating game. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but it was a win, but it felt like a loss. And as for Billy Napier, anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that I have probably been Billy Napier's biggest offender. And I am still a huge fan of Napier. Some might accuse me of being a Billy Napier apologist. And you know what? Go ahead. I will wear that like a badge of honor. But he's still human, okay? He's not perfect. And he definitely deserves his fair share of criticisms. And one thing that sticks out to me, man, is why did Montreal Johnson get more carries than Trevor Etienne? Like, everybody and their moms know that Trevor Etienne is clearly running back one. And listen, I love Montreal Johnson, and Montreal Johnson is a very good back. The problem, though, is that he's not elite, whereas Trevor Etienne is an elite running back. And just Montreal Johnson does not have that same edge that he did last year. And maybe he's just that kind of player who can only succeed when he's got like a certain type of player, size player, whatever, blocking for him and creating open space for him and whatever. But Trevor Etienne makes magic happen. When I'm watching Trevor Etienne, and I think I can speak for the vast majority of Gator Nation here, man. When I'm watching Trevor Etienne, I'm expecting great things to happen, and that's what we saw on the limited carries that Trevor Etienne got. He did make magic happen. Montreal Johnson simply did not. Okay, that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. And I literally thought about this before we got on here, and I also thought, well, maybe it's because Trevor Etienne is clearly the better back. Maybe that's why Billy Napier didn't give him as much carries, because clearly, like I said, he did not take it seriously. So maybe Billy's thinking, well, I don't want to risk an injury to my running back one in a game that does not matter, because clearly, Kentucky matters more. And I mentioned Tennessee, and we all saw it, man. Billy Napier, really the whole team. I'm just saying Billy Napier because he's the guy in charge of the whole program. He had a phenomenal game plan against Tennessee. You could tell that he worked his absolute butt off against Tennessee. And while it wasn't perfect, there were definitely some things that just want to major roll your eyes. For the most part, the game plan was executed flawlessly, and I expect Billy and the boys to have a much better prepared game against Kentucky. I'm not saying that we're going to win against Kentucky, but I am saying that you should have definitely expect a better game. And you know what's also really funny, Matty? Perspective might honestly be the funniest thing ever because think about it. Before the season started, most people had us at 2-2. Those two wins, of course, being against McNeese and Charlotte, and those two losses, of course, being against Utah and Tennessee. Well, if you had told Gator fans that we were guaranteed to go 3-1, with one of those losses being against either Utah or Tennessee, I think most of us would have taken that easily. Okay, so it's easy to be in the moment right now and be frustrated with the performance against Charlotte, and we should be. That was a pathetic performance with the quality of opponent. Again, Charlotte fans, I'm not trying to disrespect you guys. I'm not trying to like be rude or anything, but when you have one team literally coming off an emotional double-digit win over a heated division rival, and then you have another team that came off back-to-back losses where they got outscored by like an average of 79 to 45, I think 79 to 45, then you can't blame me for thinking that we were going to roll over you guys. And obviously I was wrong. And again, credit to you guys, and especially your defense. But still, when you take a step back and you realize, okay, this game was frustrating, yes, but then again, big picture here, we are sitting at 3-1. Nobody expected us to be 3-1. So that has to count for something, man. So offense was inconsistent, but give credit to Graham Mertz, man. I think it's safe to say now at this point, through 4 games, Graham Mertz is not the issue. I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but I know that he's completing well over 70% of his passes. I believe he only missed 3 throws all game last night, man. And Pro Football Focus gave him, I believe it was a 92.5 overall grade. So Graham Mertz, played a very, very, very solid game. Defense once again was fantastic. And listen, if Austin Armstrong is not the favorite for the Broyles Award right now, then tell me who is. Do I expect our defensive points per game average to go up when we play the likes of Georgia, South Carolina, LSU, Arkansas, FSU? Yes, but that does not take away how much better we have been compared to years past, because that defense you're seeing, Matty, that is clearly a very disciplined, very organized team, much more organized, much more disciplined than we've seen, before, especially last year when our defense was just hot trash and arguably the worst in the Power Five. And of course, it looks like we finally found a kicker. So shout out to Trey Smack, who was pretty much our games or our team's MVP. So glad we got a win. And of course, if we win against Kentucky, then all of a sudden people are going to go back to singing Billy's praises again, because that's just how our fan base is. That's how college fan bases in general are, man. You lose or you look bad against a team that you're expected to look great against, people are going to call for your head. People are going to just, act irrational, and you can't blame them for that. But then when you win against, if you win against a team that is definitely a better quality, or you get a blowout win, then suddenly people are back to singing your praises again, man. But that's pretty much all I have, unless you got questions for me. But that's pretty much all I have for the Florida game right now.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the coffin there. When you are a team that had pretty low expectations, such as Florida did coming into the year, I wouldn't say Florida themselves did, but the media had pretty low expectations for Florida. When you win against a high caliber team such as Tennessee, those expectations go up. And when you don't perform well against a Charlotte team, then you start turning heads a little bit, but not in the right direction. So I came away with two observations from that game, and I'll use the analogy of a wide receiver trying to run with the ball before he caught it. And I feel like that's exactly what Florida was doing. Is their mind was on Kentucky. It wasn't on Charlotte, and you need to focus on that game at hand and not the game next week. And then my other observation was you played a very, very physical game against Tennessee where people were cramping left and right or getting hurt left and right. It was very physical. So you were a little banged up going into this game. I wouldn't say serious injuries, but banged up. And I think those two factors were on full focus, full display on Saturday. So you have a great game against Kentucky coming up this next week. Now is the time that the team can focus on it. You just can't focus on it during a game against another team. So those were my two observations.
That's exactly right, Matty. And just another point that I want to add is the only reason why I can't be 100% frustrated is because this felt like a game, as I said before, that we did not take seriously. So I have to think that okay, we definitely weren't opening up the playbook that much because I know what we're capable of. But I was actually I heard a very good point from a Florida Gators podcast called High Top Sports, which by the way to all of our Gator followers, you should check out High Top Sports. Shelton does a phenomenal job, and I can't remember if it was Shelton himself who said this or if it was a commenter who said it. But from the show, it said that um, fans pay money to see a good product, right? Again, I understand, and I'm sorry for beating a dead horse. I can sort of understand overlooking an opponent. Well, I can understand, and I also can't understand at the same time. But like we don't need to go further into that. The point I'm trying to make here is that at the end of the day, fans pay to see a good product on the field, and especially when fans travel out of state and they tailgate all day, and that's what they see, then you can't blame people for being frustrated. Again, that's the point that I heard on High Top Sports, and I thought that was an excellent point.
Yeah, no, I think that is a really great point. Is you have that brand recognition, and Florida has been that brand recognition that people have always recognized as being such a great team. So when they're paying their hard-earned money to go watch them, they have an opinion at that point. So, but I want to transition things to my game. I'm gonna start it off here with a quote. Very, very legendary quote. I'm gonna put it now is they're fighting for clicks. We're fighting for wins. If you didn't hear that quote, that is Dan Lanning right there, Oregon's head coach. And I'll tell you what, I had chills on my arms. I was so pumped when I heard that. There are pregame speeches from a coach that you're going to hear F bombs, you're going to hear some curse words. And sometimes it really does get the team worked up. But that's all I needed to hear. I know I'm not the team, but I sure was ready to go play for the team when I heard that. They're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins. And sometimes just stating the obvious like that is what the team needed to hear. And I'll tell you what, they heard him loud and clear. Oregon 42, Colorado 6. If that's not the smackdown, then I don't know what it is. Oregon coming into the game was 21-point favorites, so this was the expectation was to play smash mouth football like this, and that's exactly what Oregon did. And to Greg Jennings out there, I'm sure you're scratching your head wondering, wow, where did this Pac-12 defense come from? I didn't think Pac-12 was good at defense. Well, yeah, bud, they are. Right? All right. Playing Nebraska, who plays in the Big Ten, doesn't automatically make you a legit defense. Okay. And I get over the years, Oregon hasn't had stellar defense, but actually they did in the 2019 season. But that's a topic for a different day. So I hope this opened your eyes and it opened up other people's eyes. I'm not saying Colorado is a fraud. Their wins just weren't as good as the media made it seem to be. Just as Oregon's defense and their offense is as good as it's meant to be. So you put that combination together. There's a reason why it was a 42-6 win for the Ducks. I'm gonna go over a couple stats here. We're gonna talk about Bo Nix first. Bo Nix, he was one of my keys to victory is having that faith in him. Let him be the leader. And that's exactly what he did. He played really clean football. I know he did have one interception. I know he's beaten himself up for it. Luckily, it wasn't something that cost us the game. But as a quarterback who's been playing almost as clean as he has, that interception is something that I know he'll fix. He'll watch the film. He already knows the mistake he made. But needless to say, 28 for 33 was his stat line with 276 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was seeing the field clear as day. It was almost as if there was no Colorado defense out there. And I don't mean no disrespect to that. They were missing one of their top defenders out there in Travis Hunter. I would have loved to seen him go one-on-one against Troy Franklin out there, who is our number one receiver. Franklin put up some great numbers once again, also where he had 8 receptions for 126 yards with 2 touchdowns. So needless to say, the offense was clicking. The rushing, once again, we had 240 yards on the ground. It was pretty well split between our 3 backs. Noah Whittington did leave with an injury, and it sounds like he may be out for a bit. But we do have 2 other running backs, including our starting running back, Bucky Irving. So we were clicking on all cylinders on offense, just as we were on defense. We held Shadur Sanders to 159 yards and 1 touchdown, which he got. You could call it garbage time, but he still got a touchdown. And this is a quarterback who is coming into the game throwing well over 400 plus yards a game. So we held him to 129 yards. He looked completely lost out there, but he's just not going to get any better until that offensive line gets better. He was sacked 7 times yesterday. And if you count that with the other 3 games, he's up to 26 sacks on the year, which equivalates to about 6.5 a game. That's not good. You're not good. You need to protect your quarterback. He's going to get hurt. I hope he doesn't. But when you have an offensive line like that, that's going to let your quarterback get sacked almost 7 times a game. Something's got to give. So, but our defense, though, was lights out. I was very, very impressed to see what they were able to do in this game. And I'm going to single out actually one defender who was my player of the game, and that is Kyrie Jackson. And I look at him and I see Sauce Gardner, and that's a very big comp right there. But listen to the numbers here. Sauce Gardner is 6'3" with a 79-inch wingspan. Kyrie Jackson, 6'3" with a 78-inch wingspan, so only off by 1 inch. But if you watched him play yesterday, he was amazing. He was on an island out there. He had 3 pass breakups. They tried to go his way on these one-on-one matchups, and every time they couldn't. They couldn't even touch him. So 3 pass breakups for him. And like I said, every time I watched him play out there, I saw Sauce Gardner. So I hope that he hears this because it is a high comp, but it's not going to be I'm not going to be the only one making that comparison. So there was a lot to see for both the offense and defense for Oregon, and I was very well impressed. But I'm going to say this, though. I'm going to go on a little rant here, but a positive rant. Primetime, Colorado, they're still winning. They might have lost the game yesterday, but they're still winning. I'm going to give you some numbers here. 90.5 million, and this is not counting yesterday's game. This is the first 3 games for Colorado based on media coverage. 90.5 million is how much they've made so far off of the first 3 games off of media coverage. They gave out 848 media passes for the Nebraska game, which set a new record for college football. A record that they are expected to break already for the USC game, and they have yet to play USC. So that just shows you what they're already doing there. But here's another one. 9.3 million people is how many people turned into the Colorado State game, which was the 5th most watched game on ESPN platform. But it was also the number 1 watched in that time slot for a late window ticket on ESPN. And you're thinking, no one tunes in to watch Colorado State, let alone Colorado on a normal basis. 9.3 million people did. So let that be, an example. Another one is on the Nebraska game. It was the most watched Pac-12 regular season game in the history of Fox. And that was only one Pac-12 team there that we watched. That was Colorado. So they're doing something right. Dion, he is something tremendous to have those type of numbers. But this was my stat that made my head explode when I saw this. You look at from September of 2022 to September of 2023 right now, their sales just from merchandise alone is up 2,544%. That is unheard of. So these shades that Dion's wearing, all these things that they're doing, it may annoy people, but people like it even more than it annoys them because they're buying this merchandise. They are believing in this team. And yeah, they lost yesterday and they're going to lose several more games this year. But Dion is winning. And I'm not talking just from a financial standpoint. We see these numbers, but it's the recruits, it's the transfers. You know how many people are already thinking about transferring to Colorado next year? I'm sure a lot. You know how many recruits are already planning on committing to Colorado? Probably even more. That is what Dion is bringing to Colorado. So don't hang your heads low. Yes, you lost. You're going to lose some more. But in the end, you're going to win. I'm not saying a national championship, but I am saying your first year or two going into the Big 12, where your Big 12 is losing their two best teams in Oklahoma and Texas, your chances are now increasing on how you're going to do in that conference with what Primetime's doing for Colorado. So that's something to look at. That is a positive note, even though there wasn't much positive in the game yesterday. Colorado is still winning. So they're gonna do great. I'll say off the field when it comes to recruiting, transfers, and how much money they're bringing in. But they still do have some ballers on their team with Shadur Sanders, with Travis Hunter. So something to keep an eye on the rest of this year as well as going into next year. So did you have any thoughts on the game at all?
Yeah, quite a bit. But before I go to the actual game, just want to say that you are exactly right. Regardless of how many games the Buffaloes win, I mean, they've already more than doubled their win total from last year. They only won one game last year, and they've already won three, and that's just incredible. And to talk about merchandise, to add to your point, Matty, you know that I live in Florida, and I was at my local gas station about a week ago, and there's a man there wearing a Colorado Buffaloes hoodie. Like, yeah, dude, I'm sure you've always been a diehard Buffs fan before Dion, but again, that adds to your point. And you know, Dan Lanning. Listen, I am a I've become a huge fan of Dan Lanning, even though he comes from the Kirby Smart Georgia coaching tree. How can you watch that man and not be a fan of him? I mean, when you're a player in that locker room and you hear they're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins. You're a player, you just have to think, oh yeah, we are definitely going to clown these guys. And to all the people who are crying about Lanning's comment, first of all, you can't praise Dion for being brash and confident, and then turn around and say, "Well, why is Lanning doing this?" Because I know a lot of you are asking, "Well, hold up, isn't Colorado also fighting for wins?" Tell me you have no idea about coaching motivation without telling me you have no idea about coaching motivation. This is what coaches do, Matty. They find ways to motivate their players. And speaking of Kirby, I think it's pretty well known that Kirby is known for feeding his players some BS. Okay, there's been some things where Kirby says something, and I'm like, what? What, bro? What the heck are you talking about? That's not even close to true. But it works. It works. He finds ways to motivate his players, and of course, you can forget the infamous. Like you all thought we were going to go 7-5, and I think later Nolan Smith confirmed in an interview, like, oh yeah, we knew people didn't expect us to go 7-5. Like, oh yeah, thanks, Captain Obvious. Like we didn't actually know that. But coaches find ways to motivate players, man. That's just how it is, and it's why these it's why they have great teams. It's why they have great results. And speaking of results, now let's talk about the game. So my final prediction for Oregon Colorado was 56-19. Wasn't 56-19, but it was a blowout, which is what we expected. Unlike a certain illustration with the initials SI who said, "Oh, the nation was shocked by Oregon's win." Yeah, we were totally shocked that a team that was favored by 20 plus won by 20 plus. But just what a statement, man. Like, what a statement win, especially if you remember what Dan Lanning said during halftime. You guys are up 35-0. He goes, "We're not satisfied yet. We want more. We want more." And I know that you guys only scored seven more points, but still, you could tell that you guys wanted it. And I said before in our very first show that I believe that out of all the programs, football programs without a national championship, that you guys had far and away the best chance to win a title out of all those programs that don't have a title yet in football. And I firmly believe that Dan Lanning will be the one to lead you guys to the promised land. You guys have already made it twice under Chip Kelly and Mark Helfrich. The problem, though, is that Chip Kelly, phenomenal offensive coach, and arguably the best offensive mind the college game has seen in quite some time. But he doesn't believe in defense. And then same thing with Mark Helfrich. I think it's easy to look back in hindsight and kind of realize that, yeah, you guys won all those games because of Marcus Mariota, who went off at Oregon. And I think it was pretty obvious that you guys were winning in spite of Helfrich, not because of Helfrich. Both Lanning, listen, man, the landscape's changing in Eugene, Oregon, bro. And as I said before, that man clearly knows what it takes to win championships, and he is shifting the Ducks' identity, okay? Might not happen this year winning a championship, although the landscape is so wide open that I would not be shocked one bit if you guys did win the championship this year. But even if it doesn't happen this year, dude, if you guys can hold on to Lanning, it'll be sooner than later that you guys will finally win a championship for the first time ever.
Yeah, it's what I'm seeing in Lanning is that hunger. And last year, Lanning and the Ducks were humbled in week 2 where we played Georgia, his former team. We got whooped. Didn't score a single touchdown. We got whooped. And at the halftime this game, nothing. Satisfied. We want more. And I don't take that as being cocky. I take that as being hungry. And I love that. I love that for a coach. He is everything that I thought he was and more because of those comments, his halftime comments, his pregame comments, and I absolutely love it. So I yesterday in a normal season where Dion wasn't there, this would have just been a normal game, but it ended up being a coming out party more for us because of the national media implications it had. Whereas normally, like I said, it would not. So for the world out there, you're seeing a very balanced Oregon Ducks team. We have a curse, I'll say, when it comes to offensive coordinator, but Will Stein, who is our new offensive coordinator, he is a very big pickup, and I'm happy to have him there on the offensive side. But one thing that I see that Dan Lanning's doing is everyone knows Dan Lanning, defensive guru, defensive minded coach, but I see him constantly talking to Bo Nix. That's what a leader is supposed to do with another leader. And that's what I'm seeing is yes, he's a defensive minded coach, but he's talking to Bo Nix. He's seeing, all right, what went wrong there or what went right? And he's building off of that. So I absolutely love that. It makes me excited. Yes, expectations are going to continue to rise and rise and rise the more we win, but I came away very, very pleased with the game, and I hope the rest of America who watched it did as well. So one,
Awesome. And then I just have one final point that I want. Oh yeah, sorry. Just one final point that I wanted to add that I want to ask you guys. So as I'm watching the game, I believe one of the announcers said that Oregon, one thing Oregon struggles with is tackling. Now, I don't know if he meant this year or if he meant just like overall the reputation that you guys have. But what do you make of that comment?
yeah, historically Oregon, I feel like hasn't always been a a very well tackling school, and I think that just comes with, and I see it all the times in the pros too, is people aren't wrapping up anymore, and they're constantly trying to strip the ball. And when you are doing that, you're not going to make the tackle. The ball carrier is going to love that, unless it's something that it's right after a catch and they're going to run with it. Knocking the ball out is pretty hard. These ball carriers, especially running backs, they've got a killer grip on that ball. Wrap up. And that's one thing that I feel like we have made the adjustment, and we're actually doing pretty well this year. I couldn't tell you the exact number of how many tackles we've missed, but I'm seeing a great tackling team because they are wrapping up. They're tackling where you need to be tackled. You have to know, especially with a ball carrier. It's like it reminds me back in the day watching Maurice Jones-Drew on the ball, and people were trying to go after him in the wrong way. That guy was like a bowling ball. You good luck. And so there are different ball carriers out there that you do have to tackle differently with, and I'm seeing that with this Oregon team, but they're also being physical too. Oregon's always been known for a fast team, but they're also fast and they're being physical this year. So I appreciate you bringing that up because that is something that Oregon, if you're a fan of the Oregon Ducks, you've always heard is the tackling miscues. Well, this year, we're not making those. So yeah, actually, I the other day we were talking about some of these games that we had our eyes on because of the conference that we are in. And I know one of the games that you mentioned you wanted to keep your eye on, which makes total sense because you're in the SEC, is that's Alabama at Ole Miss. Alabama coming into the game not really looking like their true self, and you had an Ole Miss team that was looking like they were trending in the right direction. So why don't you tell the audience what you saw in that game and what stood out?
Yeah, so if you caught on to our last show, I we both predicted actually an Ole Miss win, and I predicted Ole Miss to win by a score of 30 to 28. And the reason why is because, Alabama has just not looked good. Granted, yes, they've been winning, other than that one loss against a clearly superior Texas team. But other than that, yes, they've been winning, but they've not looked good. And they look terrible against USF. And then meanwhile, you have Ole Miss, whereas, yes, maybe they haven't played exactly the most impressive schedule to date, they at least look more organized, and clearly they at least know who their QB1 is. Whereas with Alabama, it looks like they're going to stick with Jalen Milroe, man, but that QB situation in Tuscaloosa is just a total clown show. But yeah, I just if there was ever a time for Lane Kiffin to finally have his number against Nick Saban, this was the game. And Lane, you blew it. Do you hear me? You blew it. This was far and away your best shot, and now you're probably never going to get a chance to beat Bama, or at the very least, you're never going to get a chance to beat Saban ever again, man, because this was your best opportunity to do it, and you blew it. And but even so, man, like Alabama did not look that impressive. They only scored 24 points. Jalen Milroe had a 17 of 21 passing, 225 yards, a touchdown, and interception. So not great, not terrible. He was decent. But hey, you know what? Good news for Alabama is that now they are on the right track, because at the end of the day, they are 3-1, and this is Alabama we're talking about. This is Saban we're talking about, and they could easily, crawl their way into an 11-1 record. Also, apologies if you heard that. That was my email and forgot to turn it off. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, Alabama could easily walk their way into an 11-1 record. Although personally, I think they're going to lose to LSU. I think LSU is quite clearly the better team, man. But yeah, like I said, Ole Miss blew it. There's nothing more to say. They blew it.
Yeah, they definitely did. I had predicted Ole Miss to win this game. It just seemed right. It seemed like that basketball player with a wide open layup on a breakaway, and they had that and they missed it. So it's something that he may just have to live with because who knows how much longer Saban's going to be around. And if he is going to be around for a bit longer, he's not going to have a team as bad as this team. So, Lane, you blew it, just like David said. And, well, on to the next one. But one of the games that I had an eye on was the Utah versus UCLA game. And several reasons that I kept an eye on is one, there was rumors Cam Rising was going to be back, and that did not happen. But it sounds like he's getting closer and closer. But undefeated versus undefeated, UCLA with Chip Kelly, old Oregon coach, and Dante Moore, the old Oregon recruit that ended up flipping to UCLA. It was very much an exciting matchup for me going into it because one, they're both undefeated. Two, the Pac-12 has not looked this good as a combined that in a while. So of course I'm gonna keep my eye on every Pac-12 team. But three, I did want to see if Cam Rising was going to be back and how this Utah team meshes when it comes to having their starting quarterback back. So Utah is the back-to-back defending Pac-12 champs, and they're going for a three-peat. And it's scary. It is scary because they are a very good football team. They are 4-0 while playing their backup quarterback. So that just shows their discipline there. So I'm nervous against them because of what they've done in the Pac-12 the last several years and what they're continuing to do now. So Utah did win the game 14-7. It wasn't a high scoring game. It wasn't even the cleanest game, but a 14-7 victory. And I'll continue to be watching Utah for the rest of the year. Were there any other games that you were looking more from a conference standpoint on the future when it comes to Florida? Any rivalries?
Maybe not from a conference standpoint, from a rivalry standpoint, yes, and that was FSU versus Clemson. And I'll make a quick point about this. I expected FSU to win, and that's exactly what they did. I think overtime win is probably what we should have expected because they had not won there or they had not beaten Clemson in 7 years, and so I got the win, man. They got the win, man, and I think if you look at the rest of FSU's schedule, other than probably against Duke, I think they're going to win the rest of their games by double digits, and then we'll see what happens when they come to the Swamp.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that goes. Florida State's been looking not as strong as they did, at least in week one, but they're still racking up the wins. But one of the better games, actually, of the weekend that a lot of people are talking about, as they should, was Washington State with the upset over Oregon State. Oregon State was coming in as the favorites, and they lost 38-35, and that's closer than what it ended up being expected because of how much Washington State was on the gas pedal at the beginning of the game. So 38-35, Oregon State was trying to come back big. It did not work out well for them, but I was very impressed with Cameron Ward and what that Washington State team did. Oregon State did mix it up a little bit, especially in the second half, but just a little too late. So I'll be interested to see the directions on both those teams because Oregon State did pick up their first loss of the year, so we'll see how they do. They have a phenomenal team, especially with that offensive line. But I was pleased with the games, especially our game. I know you weren't as much with Florida, but we're going to go on to the next week, and we're going to take it week by week. So with that being said, until next time, folks, please hit that like and subscribe button. Continue to support us. We much appreciate it. I'm your host, Matty Ice Raritan, and that is Mr. David Street.
Go Gators. Go Gators.